Behind the majesty of St. Peter's Basilica, behind the whispered prayers and golden altars, lies an empire, not built on faith, but on money, secrets, and silence. For over a century, the Vatican has operated like a state within a state, but few realize it also functions like a bank within a bank, with its own offshore accounts, black ledgers, and shadowy allies. This is not a story of doctrine, it's a story of deals. This is Vatican Incorporated. In 1929, the Vatican struck a deal with Mussolini. The Lateran Pact birthed the Vatican city-state, giving the church political independence and a generous cash payout. But what came next was unexpected. The Vatican hired a layman, a money man, to grow its new fortune. Bernardino Nogara, a devout Catholic? Perhaps. But first and foremost, a financier. The Vatican was never meant to be a business. Yet in 1929, when Mussolini's pen granted its sovereignty through the Lateran Pacts, something profound shifted. Along with independence came a substantial cash settlement, and the Holy See suddenly found itself with a fortune that required management. Enter Bernardino Nogara, not a priest, not a theologian, but a financial wizard with an investor's cold-blooded pragmatism. Nogara transformed the Vatican's approach to money with a single revolutionary principle. The Church's investments would not be bound by its moral teachings. Under his guidance, Vatican money flowed into arms manufacturers, fascist industries, and businesses that directly contradicted Catholic doctrine. Gold trumped gospel, profit overshadowed piety, and the foundation was laid for what would become the most secretive financial institution in modern history. While the faithful placed coins in collection plates believing they were supporting God's work, Nogara was creating shell companies across Europe, purchasing shares under assumed names, and building a labyrinth of investments so complex that even today's financial forensics struggle to map them. The Church didn't just preach, it diversified. And the Vatican's financial arm, once a modest operation, evolved into a global player. But every empire that rises leaves footprints in the dark. As World War II engulfed Europe, the Vatican's neutral status made it the perfect haven for money-seeking sanctuary from chaos. Gold, artifacts, and currency poured through its doors. Some came from desperate refugees seeking protection. Other sums arrived via more questionable channels. The Vatican's coffers swelled, and with them, its silence deepened. By the 1960s, the Institute for Religious Works, the innocuous name for what we now call the Vatican Bank, had evolved into something unprecedented, a financial entity that answered to no government, complied with no international regulations, and opened its books to no one. Not even God himself could audit these accounts without a fight. The true genius of the Vatican's financial system wasn't just its secrecy, but its immunity. Operating as a sovereign state within Italy, it could refuse investigators at its borders. Functioning as a religious institution, it could claim moral exemption from financial scrutiny. It existed in a perfect gray space, neither fully bank nor fully church, neither fully bank nor fully church. This immunity created the perfect storm in the 1970s when the Vatican Bank became entangled with Roberto Calvi and the Banco Ambrosiano. Calvi wasn't called God's banker for his piety. The nickname stemmed from his intimate financial relationship with Archbishop Paul Marcinkus, the American cleric who ran the Vatican Bank with the charm of a diplomat and the instincts of a hedge fund manager. Together, they constructed a financial house of cards. Banco Ambrosiano established shell companies in Panama and the Bahamas. The Vatican Bank provided letters of patronage, essentially blessing these entities with the Church's guarantee. Billions of lire flowed through this system, some financing anti-communist efforts in Poland, some allegedly supporting right-wing causes in Latin America, and some simply disappearing into private accounts. When the house of cards began to collapse, Calvi fled Italy with a fake passport and secrets that threatened the very foundation of the Vatican's financial empire. Days later, on June 18, 1982, His body was discovered hanging beneath London's Blackfriars Bridge, his pockets filled with bricks and cash. The British initially ruled it suicide, a conclusion so implausible that it was later revised to murder. But who silenced Calvi? The mafia? Who had allegedly used Banco Ambrosiano's channels? Was it members of the secretive P2 Masonic Lodge, whose influence stretched into every corner of Italian power, or parties within the Vatican itself, desperate to maintain centuries of financial secrecy? The trail led in all directions and ultimately nowhere. Calvi died. His accomplices vanished. And the church? It remained untouched. The Vatican settled the Banco Ambrosiano collapse with a $250 million payment to creditors, a moral gesture they insisted, not an admission of guilt. Archbishop Marcinkus remained protected behind Vatican walls, immune from Italian prosecution thanks to diplomatic immunity, repeating his infamous philosophy, "You can't run the church on Hail Marys alone." But Calvi wasn't the only one who knew too much. Journalists who dug too deeply into Vatican finances met troubling fates. Mino Pecorelli, an investigative reporter who had been probing connections between the Vatican Bank, the P2 Lodge, and Italian politics, was shot dead in Rome in 1979. Carmine Pecorelli, another journalist on the financial corruption beat, vanished before he could publish his most damning findings. Their stories, like their investigations, remained unfinished. The threads connecting Vatican finance to global intrigue multiplied. Evidence emerged suggesting the Vatican Bank had been instrumental in channeling CIA funds to anti-communist movements behind the Iron Curtain during the Cold War. Other documents hinted at connections to Operation Gladio, NATO's secret stay-behind army in Europe. The Holy See had become a player in geopolitics, with its bank serving as both weapon and shield. Yet, despite occasional scandals that reached public consciousness, the Vatican's financial empire remained largely impenetrable until the digital age began to erode even the strongest walls of secrecy. The first cracks appeared during Pope Benedict XVI's troubled reign. In 2012, the Vatican's own butler leaked documents revealing internal power struggles and financial corruption. The Vatileaks scandal exposed a church hierarchy torn between reformers and those determined to preserve the old financial order at any cost. Less than a year later, Benedict shocked the world by resigning, the first pope to do so in nearly 600 years. While health concerns were the official explanation, Vatican insiders whispered of a secret dossier presented to Benedict, detailing blackmail schemes, money laundering operations, and a gay lobby within the church that controlled significant financial levers. The truth remains buried in sealed Vatican archives, but the timing was, at minimum, suggestive. Pope Francis arrived with promises of transparency and reform. "How I would love a church that is poor and for the poor," he declared. His words signaled a radical departure from centuries of accumulation and secrecy. For a moment, it seemed the Vatican's financial fortress might finally open its books. Reality proved more complex. Francis did create new oversight committees and invited external auditors to examine Vatican finances. He forced out some of the old guard, including Cardinal Angelo Becciu, once among the most powerful financial operators in the Vatican. Becciu was stripped of his cardinal rights and put on trial for embezzlement, accused of channeling church funds into questionable investments, including a luxury London property deal that lost the Vatican millions. Yet for every reform, the system found ways to resist. Auditors resigned in frustration. Oversight committees saw their powers curtailed. Financial scandals continued to emerge, from lavish apartments renovated with funds meant for a children's hospital to millions in Peter's pence, donations given by ordinary Catholics for charitable works being diverted to cover administrative shortfalls and speculative investments. The Vatican Bank still operates largely in shadows. Its full portfolio remains unknown, Avoid costly finance mistakes. Finance Fiascos Volume 1 Raw Confessions plus mind map PDFs for bite-sized quick review of these videos. Use code CLUE10 for 10% off today only. The true extent of its holdings, from luxury real estate across Europe to art collections worth incalculable billions, can only be estimated. Even in our age of transparency, the Vatican's financial empire retains its essential mystery. Why does this matter? Because the contradiction strikes at the heart of an institution that preaches poverty while practicing financial secrecy. Because billions flow through its channels while parishes close and basic services for the faithful diminish. Because power without accountability corrupts, even when that power speaks in Latin and dresses in white. Empires rise, empires fall, but the Vatican has endured for 2 millennia, not just through faith, but through finance. It may preach in Latin, but it counts in dollars. And until the books are truly opened, the story of Vatican Inc. will remain unfinished. I'm Captain Clue, your qualified government accountant. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications.